Welcome back to the 27. This is a custom setup analysis for the brand new Corvette C8R GTE. We're going to be reviewing the default setup package for this car in game and comparing it to a package that I created with the hopes that I can either help you come to terms with the car or get faster or both. As far as my first impressions go, I drove it in conjunction with the major 1.2 physics update, so initially it was a bit tough to unpack what was the C8R and what was the physics changes, but I can tell you this, it felt great out of the box, and literally every subsequent lap just got better and better. The car brakes beautifully, it turns in when you want it to, mid-corner it rotates when asked to do so, and the exit is playful, just begging you to get the power down earlier and earlier. It's consistent out of the box as well, with no real tire temp imbalance issues and no other serious problems that I can even point out. What takes it to the next level though is that it has some serious rotation without the back end stepping out. It feels planted pretty much at all times unless you decide to unplant it. So what that means for you is the default package is hereby officially given the Steelcast 27 stamp of approval. If you're short on time and just want to jump into a race, you'll be just fine. Under these circumstances, it makes my job a whole hell of a lot more challenging to find time, but there's always something you can do. Looking at the default setup screen, a couple of things stood out first, and those were how soft the springs were, how level the car was with virtually no rake, and how high the differential ramp angles were. Typically, soft springs like that, although great at keeping the tires on the road, can lead to aero issues, like drastic changes to the center of pressure, also a general wishy-washy feeling while cornering, including brake sensitivity. Regards to the differential, this is preference, but I don't want the car to rely on the differential in order to rotate. I don't want the car to unlock while you're cornering all the time. In fact, I like a more locked differential to provide braking stability and more power on corner exit. I have a feeling if this car was introduced prior to the 1.2 update, it would be quite a different machine. So we cleaned all that up though. The next thing that was not quite a red flag, but kind of like a yellow flag, and that was how the car didn't take advantage of the sixth gear as much as I thought on my test tracks. It would have been fine at a place like Daytona, but I decided to give the C8R a shorter first gear for better acceleration and make the gearing a little bit more appropriate to use the sixth gear. That being said, if you do go to a place like Daytona, making the sixth gear a bit longer might be in order. Finally, I decided to increase the rear downforce, which in turn made the car feel more stable at high speeds, but with some added rake and some softness to the front ARBs, the car still cornered magnificently during high-speed sections. So let's take a look at Racing Sim Tools. Alright, so here we are. I want to direct your attention to the top left here, and these are the two sessions that I ran, one with the default package and one with the custom package. And you can see how similar the lap times were with most laps being in the mid-39s, except for this final lap here that I actually ran almost getting into the 38s, which I was actually quite happy with. It just shows the potential of the custom build, but ultimately we're looking for consistency. But before I go through the Racing Sim Tool breakdown, I wanted to preface something, and that was one of the major changes that you might have noticed when looking at the setup screens in AMS2. They switched a lot of the suspension components to an incremental click system. This, I have been assured, is going to be switched back to the actual spring and damper rates, or at least we're going to be given the option. The reason why that's important is because this software is pulling a broadcast from the game, and in order to anchor all of that data and put it into these graphs, it requires some variables in the algorithm so that we can actually see what's going on with a lot of the suspension components, for example the lateral stiffness distribution. So you can see already that this chart right here at the top here is kind of vacant. There's nothing here for lateral stiffness distribution. We have aero data, but it's based off of just like nothing. I don't even know if these are actually accurate. So there's a lot of things in racing sim tools that we can't use. There is stuff that we can use. I'm looking forward to seeing how I put this build together with feel only for the most part, and judging it later against the telemetry once we have the actual rates for the cars. But that being said, a lot of telemetry work is just a time saver. Most, if not all, of the things that you can do as far as setup work is concerned, you do it by feel, and that comes first. Everything that you do is by feel. The telemetry software is just a guide. It's just a record of what's going on, so you can ultimately save time if you know what you're doing. So let's pull some data together. And the most important thing that I wanted to showcase here was taking a look at the default package. All it comes down to, and I harp on this a lot, and that is tire wear. And you can see with the default package, it's not terrible. You're looking at 8.5% after 3 laps in the right rear, 5.46% in the front left. So the front left is getting the less wear, and the rights, especially the right rear, are getting more wear. That's not uncommon. It's the degree. So when I finished my setup, I was pleased to see, and this is a key for me to know that the setup is actually working as intended. The key for me was to look at the wear and see how much more balanced the wear is across all tires. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, 8.5 versus 7, what's the big deal? Well, if you're in a sprint race, this is going to be just fine. You can get away with 8.5% on the right rear in 6 laps. Your tires aren't going to fall off that much. But when you're talking about endurance racing, when you're talking about multiple pit stop rotations, these things can add up. So you're looking at an extra 2%, 1 to 2% every 3 laps. You do 60 laps, and that's a material effect on how often you're pitting. So I was happy to see that. I cleaned that up. Let's take a look at the traction circle here. This really is a good showcase for how the car is handling overall, how much grip that you're getting or you're able to extract. And so let me shrink this down. It's a little bit easier to read when it's kind of shrunk down. Let me see if I can shift this. There we go. Come on, now go this way. That's right. Okay, great. So the red dots is the custom package, and the blue dots is the default package. Now you can see how similar they are. You can barely distinguish it, but the devil's in the details. Out here on the outskirts, you see mostly red. Over here you see some blue mixed in, but mostly red out here. That means I'm extracting. I'm going to shift it back and forth so maybe it's a little bit more apparent. But you can see that there's a lot more blue data points, especially in the middle here. Okay. The other interesting thing I found was with the higher rear wing, we get a lot more cornering ability. So let me switch to the time slip graph real quick and get these all set up. Let's go here, and you can see over the course of the lap that I gained a half a second over the default time. But where it's important where we found that time. So it looks like at the entry into Tamburello, I was better under braking with the defaults, but then the exit of that I came out better with the customs, and then we gained a gob of time at Villeneuve and at Tosa. So that was a huge chunk of time right there, pretty much the entire lap's worth of time just in those 2 corners. And that's what, when you put a setup together based on feel, that's what it can give you. Now I lost some time going through the rest of the lap, but I think that's generally maybe just the comfort level of the car being similar, maybe a little mistakes here and there, who knows, but it's very similar time. But then again, here at the Ravazza bends, gained a ton of time here. So this car performed admirably in Villeneuve and Tosa, and also Ravazza, which are really crucial parts of Imola. and that led to basically a half a second on track. Finally, let's take a look at the run tab once again, but instead of looking at the tire wear, we're going to be looking at something that I haven't shown you guys before. We're going to be looking at the optimal tire temperature. Now, no one really knows what the optimal tire temperature of these tires are. They're sort of just like a programmed version of their racing counterparts, but they're not necessarily set in stone. So let me pull this out so you can see what I'm talking about here. Okay, so I'm going to isolate the custom build here, and then you can see all of these data points are, you know, grip / tire temp, or lateral G data points, I should say, and tire temp. So whenever there's a data point grabbed, that means the car was at that G level, at that tire temp. But generally speaking, where they gather is a good indication of where the optimal tire temperature is. So here, when you read these types of things, is you look for like the arc of centralized data. So it's looking like in the rears here, this arc peaks around 76 degrees C, and then also on this it peaks around 71. But you're not really losing all that much. You're losing maybe 0.4 G, you know, when it gets down to like down here. Let's take a look at the custom package. Let's overlay it. And it looks like the custom package, the default package, the blue, is more on the cold side of things. So the tires were actually cooler than they needed to be in a lot of circumstances, and then they started to warm up, and you can see, but it doesn't look like I was able to take advantage of get to the optimal tire temperatures with the default package at Imola, and that's something of a concern. I mean, what it comes down to is just basically 0.1 G, 0.2 G, but that's important, and that'll lead to, you know, those tenths that you'll find on the track. So that's the Corvette C8R, my first build in AMS2's new era. I hope you like it. Coming up next will be the Porsche 911 RSR GTE, and later the Cadillac DPI. We'll be doing the same thing for those cars, which is trying to find some time with them. Both of them are beautifully done. In the meantime, please feel free to leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and take care.